The whole puppetry thing really became important to me when I did the project with the other people with disabilities, the Life Outside the Box. And from that project, Emma Fisher became aware of my work. She invited me to give a talk at Broken Puppet Symposium in Cork. That led to being surrounded by these amazing people all involved with puppetry. And I know I was part of that world, but yet I didn't know I was part of that world. So yeah, it was just being part of this puppetry world. I really started looking at my own life in terms of puppetry. You know, how could I explore my own life further with puppetry, apart from it always being, you know, on the outside, like doing it with other people, or my other creative work was always much more making things more beautiful or something, and puppetry doesn't really have that.
Yeah.
It does and it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, and I wanted to explore that. But while I was in hospital last year, I realized that I had lost yet more of my ability of being able to create. Throughout the whole time of illness, I always have to find new ways to create. So I was like, what else can I do? How can I still be creative? How can I develop my puppetry further with more and more limitations? And so I started talking to Emma and said, will we apply for a mentoring bursary? And you can help me, because Emma, you know, identified as a puppeteer with a disability as well. And she had done all the research. She had done this PhD. So amazing puppeteer, amazing knowledge, you know, like, yes, she can maybe help me to see where I can go with my story. How can I explore my own life through puppetry? So we applied for funding from the Arts and Disability Ireland, and to my surprise, we got it, because when I started writing it, I was still so ill from the time in hospital that I actually had difficulties actually writing, you know, keeping my brain ready to write. And working on the application was already healing, because I had to think, I had to, you know, push myself to actually write. So for me, having written that application with help of Emma, was done, you know, and then I got it. I wanted to work with the existing puppets that I had, because they were just hanging in my studio doing nothing, and they have a story to tell, but I'm not able to use them. I can't hold them, you know. So there was all these stories to tell, but how could I do it? So the idea was to write a script with my existing puppets, and as well look at how I could possibly modify my puppets, or to explore more alternative, more accessible puppetry, which the main thing turned out to be shadow puppetry. Throughout the whole illness, I'm ill 20 years. So throughout this whole period, I had to keep reimagining myself, rethinking how I can possibly do, especially my creative work. I mean, in life in general. But before I got ill, I did my sculptures pretty much in the same way I make my puppets. And then I lost that ability. I couldn't hold tools. I couldn't hold a pen. I couldn't sit up long enough. You know, I didn't have strength in my hand. I lost my coordination. I lost everything. So initially, like, I started making drawings, which I'd never done before I got sick, really. But that was something that I could do. It was quick and easy. And years later, I got back into sculpting again. But now it's the reverse again. Like, I can't really make the puppets the way I made them. And even if I can make them, I can't actually animate them. So they're there, but there's nothing I can do. So I had to and like I said, re-enabling, like, what can I do? How can I do it? One of the puppets that I made was an octopus. It was a glove puppet. And I had made a design and asked my PA to cut the fabric, and I showed her how the sewing machine worked, and she was going to do all the work. And I was lying around my recliner while she was in my studio, because I couldn't sit up long enough to be in the studio with her. And I'm like, this is wrong, you know? Like, yes, she was making it, and she was making it according to my specifications, but I wasn't involved. And I was lying here thinking, but maybe I can pin the fabric together, you know? So I text her. The studio is just in my garden. Like, I text her, I said, Lorraine, I think I can still be part of this. So she brought it in and brought the pins and everything. And I was lying in my recliner. I'm like, yes, I can do this. And then I realized, well, I can also maybe do the basic stitches. And I was lying here and I was absolutely chuffed because I found a new way to make a puppet. The energy that went into the octopus wasn't just the actual making, it was also the energy of, I can do this, you know? And I finished it. Like, she did all the sewing, I did the stuffing here, and I hand sewed, you know, the last bits together. I cut a sock which had these anti-slip rubbery bits on it. Yeah. And they were perfect for the bottoms of the octopus, you know, for the suction pads. So I did all that lying down. I'm like, brilliant. It was really important to me. Later on in the whole process, another part that I realized I could do was shadow puppetry. Again, the making, not just the doing, but also the making. Like, again, I was just lying down, cutting out the shape of my tree, my beloved tree in the garden. I cut tiny little birds, like tiny little birds with little scissors here. And, you know, again, most of it lying down. And it's just a joy to realize that there's always a way. Don't be afraid to try. Not everything works. Like, you know, not all my ideas of like, but I can try this way. It doesn't always work. But my motto has always been, even when I was teaching with the other people with disabilities, there's always a way, you know, there's always a way you can do it slightly different. With that project, the Life Outside the Box, yes, I had help too, but I was a facilitator. I led the project. I taught 9 other people how to make a puppet. We made the film, we made a book, we did everything. I was one of the members there, you know. Projects don't always have to be led, or shouldn't be led, by able bodies because they don't know. The adaptations that I made for some of the participants there, nobody else could have come up with that. I'm not saying I'm brilliant here. It's just my own. I had to adapt my own tools, my own work methods. And with that project, I knew my fellow members, so I knew what their struggles were, but also what their possible abilities were. So we adapted tools, adapted work methods. And it was just beautiful to see how people grew from that, you know, they got a kick out of it. Yeah. And I get a kick out of that, you know. I get a kick out of it for me personally when I realized I can make an octopus, but I get as big a kick out of it when I see all the other people, you know. There was one man, he couldn't use the scissors, but he realized if he only closed it a little bit, he could cut fabric. And it was like one of these light bulb moments. And he had been months in occupational therapy and nobody thought about, you know. So the creative process, I think, can aid to find those opportunities. Birds, I suppose I got to understand the birds by the first couple of years that I was pretty much bedbound, housebound. I had bird feeders by my windows. And I started learning about the birds. I got the bird books. I got to know who they are. I got to see their antics, you know, because I wasn't doing anything. I was just lying there. So, you know, I could see their struggles and I could see how they minded each other. And, you know, so I learned, in a way, I learned about my existence by watching the birds. People always have this perception like, oh, birds are free and they're flying and they're, you know, it's freedom, which, yes, there is that as well. And I think I did use that metaphor for the first couple of years, but then I realized that maybe my metaphor of freedom was actually flying away from reality. It wasn't actually based on reality, wasn't my reality. I was flying away. I wasn't getting any better. Like the birds, it could be hailstones. They still have to go out there and eat. They still have to keep going. And I take great, strength from that. Like, fair play to you guys. I mean, they're tiny. And there's wind blowing and the trees are going and the birds are still out there. They're soaking and they're still out there. They still have to keep going. I think they're amazing, amazing creatures. I have bird feeders everywhere. My garden is absolutely full of birds right now. There's no greater joy for me than watch the birds. In terms of this project, obviously birds became part of this project as well because Emma looked at my sculptures, and one of the last big sculptures that I made before this puppetry kind of took over was called Birth Dance. And it's a crane type bird and a doll standing in front of it and she's dancing and they have the same kind of movement. And while I was making it, I thought, I wish I'd made this into a puppet, but I was too far because it takes me 6 months or more to make something like that. So I was too far in. But there is actually beautiful movement in the sculpture. And when Emma saw that, she said, I can make it move. I can make it dance. And she got her phone and she played around with the source of light and the bird and the puppet or the doll. They were just one. Mind-blowing, So birds had to be in my story. And then on the other side of birds is the bird phoenix, which kind of came up in this project. One of the things that I wanted to explore was this reality of living with this illness or of facing death. There's been a good few times that I'm like, I wasn't too sure I'd wake up the following morning, but yet I'd rise from the ashes again. It might take years, it might take days after a relapse, but I do come out of it again. So it is a bit like the phoenix, you rise from the ashes again. In the end, I decided not to follow the phoenix route because it's very drastic, the burning, and mainly because I was worried about other people with ME. I felt a responsibility towards them to not make this film into something extremely difficult. I had to be a little bit more subtle with that. I rise from the ashes, but my creativity does as well. I come back in a different way all the time. So the phoenix birds, they recurrent theme for sure. Can't get away from them. Yeah. Octopus, she was a very unexpected part in this whole project, but she became the project. Years ago, I started writing a story about my great-grandmother, who I was told her spirit was somehow attached to me, and it was described to me like a big head over me. When I was told, it was like, it makes absolute sense. Not that I knew it was my great-grandmother, but the sensation of something pressing me down and touching my skin like an octopus. So I started writing this fictionalized story of my life, bringing my great-grandmother's life into it. Didn't get to finish because it was a bit too close for comfort at the time. But when Emma started talking about shadow puppetry, the word shadow triggered this memory of this book. And I was like, oh. So I told Emma the story. So the octopus, she kind of made her way in. The octopus became the ME, became the illness. And the octopus also became the hand that holds the cross of a marionette, which I had made a drawing of very early on in the illness. And I had described, who is that hand who keeps me upright, who makes me stumble, who is in control. So for the film, we kind of said, well, maybe the octopus is actually the hand. So the octopus manipulates my life. It just made sense. I mean, it's bizarre and it's scary and it's uncomfortable. It's challenging, but it seems absolutely right. I found the perfect fabric in my studio that my mother had given me over 20 years ago. It all made sense. And these things you can't make up. You can't plan them in advance. They just happen. So yeah, the octopus, like, it's my great-grandmother in a way. It's the ME. It's the hand that holds the crust, that manipulates everything. Like, in terms of the puppetry, it shows up as a shadow. It's constantly there. Even now, she's kind of on my shoulder almost. The octopus has very strict rules in a way. Things have to be done in a certain way, and if you don't listen, she'll attack. I shared the imagery very early on with other people with ME and with more severe ME than I have. And before I even explained what it was, they said, oh my God, that's the ME. And that's the time when you were in hospital and you lost your voice. And lots of people could identify with the pressure of that octopus. And she's very uncomfortable. But the only way I can work with her is to be with her, to give her her space and to listen to her, like listen to ME. While I was developing the project, I realized that the octopus is probably also the multi-layered health system I'm dealing with. When I was in hospital last year, when having lost my ability to speak and swallow, and my mobility suddenly went a lot worse. And when they rule out like a stroke and things, I was sent to a psychiatrist again. And I know one thing, this illness is 21 years is not because of psychiatric illness. The politics around ME has been taken over by psychiatrists, and they now call it the functional neurological disorder. And just by happy thoughts, you can be grand. So in a way, the octopus initially took my ability to speak away and landed me in hospital. But then the medics took my voice away because they didn't listen to what I was saying. They didn't listen to my story. So the octopus, for me, represents that layer of medics. And also another tentacle of it is having to deal and having to fight immensely, immensely hard for having care so I could live at home. 2 years of fighting. So for me, the octopus is also that. They have control. They have control over my life. I can have all sorts of great ideas, but I don't have the power. So the octopus became huge in a way, in lots of different ways. I have published books about this illness in the form of poems. Like, I don't call myself a poet, but they are very much condensed versions of my reality. Sometimes the fewer words I use in my writing, the stronger the story. And I think that is the same with puppetry. For me, that is the same with puppetry. The subtle movements, the breath in between. I was not keen on dialogue, but some bits needed a bit of explanation, like the octopus, that the octopus is the ME, it's the invisibility. So I started writing a poem, and I was like, oh my goodness, this could be used as the narrative. And then one of my puppets, Pauline, could narrate. On another level, a lot of people with ME, especially the more severe cases, they wouldn't be able to follow dialogue. The more tired I get as well, you could ask me a very simple question and I would have no idea how to answer or what you're actually saying. So looking at my community, it needed to be very basic, very slow, very simple. Also, there could not be sounds. Most of the time, if I watch a video, I turn down the sound. I can't deal with the sound and seeing the imagery. So it needs to be very simple. I think poetry kind of lends itself for that, I'm actually more developing the poem at the moment than the film, because we did 2 short clips and both were way beyond my physical ability. It was too much. So at the moment, I'm actually developing the poem further and make it into a book. with illustrated images of shadow puppetry, because that is what I can do. So the poem developed and took on its own life. I think that poetry, the abstraction of a story, I think was the main link to how I see my own ideas about puppetry. You know, it's almost like poetic. For the 20 years that I'm sick, or 21 years, I have used my creative skills, or learned new creative skills, to explore my existence. There were drawings and then sculptures, and a lot of times, especially my sculptures, I think, they end up being really beautiful. They still have a meaning, but their rawness has gone. And I think with puppetry, making the puppets, they still had a kind of beauty in them, but seeing them move and the power of them, totally raw. Seeing the octopus on the hospital bed, on the puppet, you know, that's raw. That is confronting. And yet at the same time, working on this project was incredibly healing, because I suppose it was so raw. I couldn't hide from it. I had to face my reality. And I did. And I really engaged with it. And it wasn't easy. And it's still not easy. But I think it was healing because I had to go so deep. Probably the deepest I've gone with my work. And even my writing, you know, my books, they might start off as being raw and they end up in something really beautiful, which is lovely, but it loses its rawness. And with this project, I couldn't do it. And I think with the octopus poem, again, it's raw. And because I had to face this rawness through the puppetry, I'm exposing myself more. I'm exposing the challenges more, and not just make it into this lovely story, because it isn't a lovely story. I am stuck at home. I am a hermit. And most of the time, I'm absolutely perfectly okay with that, because I'm very good with my own company. I don't need a radio, don't need television. You know, silence is perfectly okay. But at times, these walls is just like, get me out of here, you know. And then you face that reality. And what do you do with it? I can't actually physically leave until I have support. I think the Invisible Octopus project helped me to break the barrier and say, okay, I'm just going to throw it out there. And if people like it or not, I don't really care. I'm not writing for anybody, I'm writing for me. Doing it in a more public way makes it even more real, I think. I think this project made me, made it acceptable. This isn't an easy journey, because I think in that darkness, like when I was in hospital, like, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of hospital? But how do I get out of this state? You know, again, a worsened state. Like, how do I get out of that? How do I get out of it mentally? And it was through engaging with Emma, through applying for the mentoring, through working really honestly on this project, that it was healing. I did see the light again. I did get out of bed again, and I did become part of the garden again, and I did become part of the birds again, and I do see the light again. So in that seed of darkness, you do get that seed of creativity again, and it makes me move on again, and not in a direction. It's always in a different direction than I had anticipated. I had to find something that I can do, which is writing, which is shadow puppetry.